John sat in the conference room, staring at the holographic screens in front of him. He had been called to this galactic peace meeting without much explanation, only a vague message from his superiors. The room was filled with alien leaders and diplomats from different planets, all speaking in their strange languages, their eyes fixed on the holographic images that flashed across the room. John shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't used to being around so many aliens, let alone in a meeting of such importance. He was just a soldier, not a diplomat or a negotiator. His job was simple: serve, protect, and follow orders. But now, he found himself in the middle of a complex peace treaty between Earth and several alien civilizations. His only comfort was the fact that the humans were not the odd ones in the room. There were many other species, each with their own customs and strange features. But none of them had the same strange feeling as John. He felt out of place. The meeting had been long, filled with debates and discussions. There was talk of resources, trade, and security. John had been trying to pay attention, but his mind kept wandering. His thoughts were interrupted when the council leader, a tall alien with scales that shimmered in the light, raised his hand and silenced the room. "We are almost finished," the leader said in a deep voice that resonated throughout the room. "But before we conclude, there is one important matter left to discuss. The human delegation has agreed to our proposal of alliance. But there is one final part of the agreement we must formalize." John furrowed his brow. What could be left? He hadn't heard anything about another clause in the agreement. His heart began to race as the room fell silent. The leader continued. "In order to ensure a lasting peace between our species, we have decided to form new unions between humans. In our kind, each human will be paired with an alien counterpart, a mate who will strengthen the bond between our two peoples. This is not a request, but a requirement for peace." John's mind went blank. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. A mate. He had signed up to be part of a peace mission, not to be married off to some alien. Before he could speak, the leader gestured to a petite alien woman standing at the back of the room. She had pale skin that seemed to glow faintly, large eyes that looked curious and kind, and hair that shimmered like starlight. Her presence was calm but confident. She stepped forward, her movements graceful and precise. "Human," she said, looking directly at John. Her voice was soft but clear, with a strange melodic tone. "My name is Zara. I have been assigned to you as your partner." She smiled, her expression warm but unwavering. "You've been assigned a wife, and it's me." John stared at her, not knowing how to respond. This was not what he had expected when he joined the mission. His mind raced, trying to process the situation. His first instinct was to protest. He was a soldier, not someone who would accept an arranged marriage, especially to an alien. Zara stood there, waiting for him to say something. But all he could do was stare. He had no idea what to say. Was this some kind of joke? Was there a misunderstanding? But no one else in the room seemed surprised. In fact, many of the aliens nodded in approval, as though this was just another normal part of the peace agreement. "Please," Zara said, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "I know this may be difficult to understand, but the bond we form will not only benefit us as individuals, but also help ensure the peace between our species. It is a tradition among my people. We believe that a strong bond between two individuals is the foundation for a strong alliance between our worlds." John opened his mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say? He didn't even know her. He didn't know anything about her species, their customs, or what this meant for his future. All he knew was that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. "I know this isn't easy," Zara continued, her smile never fading. "But I believe we can make it work. You don't have to fear me. I'll help you through this, and in time, we will become more than just allies, we will be partners." John swallowed hard. He didn't want to seem rude, but this was too much to take in all at once. His life was about to be completely changed, and it was happening too fast for him to catch up. The room was silent as everyone waited for John's response. He glanced around at the other humans in the room. Some of them looked equally confused, while others seemed to accept the situation with resignation. But none of them had been paired with someone like Zara. Taking a deep breath, John stood up, still unsure of what to say. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice rough. I wasn't prepared for this. Zara's expression softened. You don't have to say anything right now, she said kindly. Take your time. We'll begin our journey together when you're ready. John nodded, feeling overwhelmed, but also strangely comforted by her words as the council meeting continued. He couldn't help but wonder what this new chapter of his life would bring. Would he be able to adapt? Would he ever understand why this arrangement was so important? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The journey to Zara's home planet was a quiet one. John sat in the back of the ship, staring out at the stars as they passed by. He had no idea what to expect. The reality of his situation was starting to sink in. He had been assigned a wife, and it was Zara, a petite alien woman from a species he knew very little about. Zara sat across from him, her eyes glancing over at him every now and then. But she didn't speak much. She seemed to be waiting for John to say something, but he didn't know what to say. He had a million questions, but none of them felt right to ask. He had never imagined that he would end up in this position, married to an alien, no less, after what seemed like hours. Zara finally broke the silence. You must be nervous, she said gently, her voice soft but clear. John looked over at her, his mind racing. Yeah, I'm nervous, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. I've never been through anything like this. Zara smiled, her lips curling into a calm, reassuring grin. I understand. It's not easy for anyone, especially humans. But trust me, it will be okay. We'll figure it out together. John didn't know how to respond. How could he figure this out? He had been thrown into a strange new life without any choice. And now he was expected to form a bond with someone he barely knew. Still, Zara's smile made him feel a little less afraid. There was something about her that seemed comforting. The ship soon entered Zara's home planet's atmosphere. The world outside the windows shifted from dark space to the soft glow of a beautiful alien world. It was green and blue, with towering structures and vast fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. John could see giant, gentle creatures moving slowly across the fields, their long necks swaying as they grazed on the alien grass. Zara noticed John's wide-eyed gaze and smiled again. This is my home, she said. Welcome. The ship landed smoothly, and the door slid open with a soft hiss as they stepped out onto the ground. John felt a rush of air that smelled fresh and earthy. The warmth of the sun felt different on his skin, not hot like Earth's, but soothing and gentle. Zara led him through a small path that wound its way through a lush, green forest. The trees were tall and thick with vibrant leaves, and the ground was covered in soft moss that felt like walking on a cushion. Birds with brightly colored feathers flew overhead, calling to each other in a language John couldn't understand. This is beautiful, John said, finally speaking his thoughts. Zara glanced over at him, her smile never fading. I'm glad you like it, she replied. This is where I grew up. They continued walking in silence for a while. John tried to take in the sights around him, but his mind kept wandering back to the strange situation he found himself in. He had no idea how to live in this new world, how to fit in, or how to connect with Zara. He didn't know what her people expected from him or what he was supposed to do now that they were married. Finally, they arrived at a large building made from smooth stone and glass. It looked like something out of a dream, elegant and beautiful, yet simple. Zara led him inside, where the air was cool and smelled like fresh flowers. The interior was full of light, with large windows that let in the sunlight and opened up to breathtaking views of the land outside. This is my home, Zara said again, but this time her voice was different. There was a hint of pride in it, and John could hear the warmth in her words. She showed him to a small room with a simple bed, a desk, and a few chairs. It was nothing like the rooms he was used to on Earth, but it was comfortable. There was a warmth to the place that made him feel at ease, even if he was still unsure of everything. I know this is a lot to take in, Zara said, standing in the doorway, but you're safe here. You don't have to worry about anything. John nodded, still feeling the weight of the situation. I'm not worried about being safe. He said quietly, I'm just confused. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Zara stepped into the room. Her expression soft. You don't have to do anything right now. Just be with me. We'll start slow. We'll learn from each other. Her words were kind, and John could feel the sincerity in them. It wasn't just a duty to her, not just some galactic arrangement. She seemed to genuinely want to help him adjust. And for the first time since the meeting in the council chamber, John started to think that maybe this wouldn't be as bad as he thought. The room felt quiet again. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a beginning, a new chapter for both of them. John wasn't sure where it would lead. But maybe it wasn't as bad as he had first thought. Zara gave him a small, reassuring smile before turning to leave. I'll be outside if you need me, she said softly as the door closed behind her. John sat down on the bed, feeling exhausted but also strangely calm. There were still so many questions, so much he didn't understand. But for the first time, he felt like maybe this could work. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. The first few days on Zara's planet were quiet but strange. John spent most of his time trying to adjust to the new environment. He had expected something different, something more chaotic, but instead, everything was calm. Zara had given him space to settle in, showing him around her home and letting him explore the area at his own pace. The whole planet seemed peaceful, almost like it was frozen in time. Zara would often check in on him, making sure he was okay, but she didn't rush him. She respected his need for time and space. John appreciated that. But there were still many things he didn't understand. The customs of her people, the way they lived, the way they thought everything was so different. One day, after a long walk through the fields, Zara took John to a large building that seemed to stretch into the sky. It was made of shining silver, with wide glass windows that reflected the light of the planet's sun. Inside, the building was full of bright rooms, with comfortable chairs and soft floors. This is the center of our community, Zara said, her voice filled with pride. It's where we come together to share ideas, learn, and work as a group. I thought it might help you understand us better. John nodded, trying to take it all in. The building was quiet, peaceful, with a hum of activity in the background. There were alien children playing in the corners, their laughter light and carefree. John couldn't help but smile, despite feeling like an outsider. It reminded him of Earth, of simpler times before everything had become so complicated. Zara guided him through the halls, showing him rooms filled with books, learning stations, and advanced technology that looked far beyond what humans had. This is where we teach our young ones, Zara explained, pointing to the displays. They learn everything from our history to our technology. We believe that knowledge is the key to a strong future. John felt a wave of curiosity wash over him. This place is incredible, he said, genuinely impressed. You have so much. Zara nodded, her eyes sparkling. Our species values knowledge above all, but we also value respect and trust. That's why we believe in pairing with humans like you. It helps both our species grow, not just in knowledge, but in understanding. John didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to argue, wanted to fight against this idea of being paired with an alien. But another part of him couldn't help but admire Zara's conviction. She believed in it. She believed that this strange arrangement could work. As they walked through the halls, Zara continued to explain the culture of her people. We're a peaceful species. We don't fight wars the way you do. We believe in working things out, learning from one another. When we form bonds, we do it to strengthen our communities, not to control each other. John listened carefully, taking in everything she said. The more he heard, the more he realized that he didn't know anything about the alien species he was now part of. They weren't like the aliens he had seen in movies or read about in history books. They weren't hostile invaders or conquerors. They were different. Later that day, Zara took John to a quiet, grassy area near the building. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the ground. The air smelled fresh and clean, like the earth after a spring rain. Zara motioned for him to sit with her on a stone bench. Looking out at the sunset, "This is where we relax after a long day," she said softly. "This is where we reflect on what we've learned and what we still need to do. I thought you might enjoy the view." John sat down next to her, feeling a little more comfortable in this peaceful place. The soft hum of the wind and the distant calls of birds filled the air. It was beautiful, but it was also strange. This was not his world. He was far from home, and everything about this place made him feel like a small part of something much larger. "So, what now?" John asked, his voice quiet. Zara looked at him, her expression kind. "Now, we begin to understand one another. We learn about each other's strengths, weaknesses, and what we need to survive in this world. The bond we share is not just about living together. It's about becoming partners, helping each other grow." John looked at her, his mind racing. He didn't know what to think. He didn't know how to feel. But Zara's calm presence made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he could make this work. There were still so many things about her and her people that confused him. But there was also something strangely comforting about being here with her. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The soft glow of the planet's second moon began to rise in the sky, casting a pale light over the land. The world felt calm, peaceful, as though everything was right in this moment. John didn't know what the future would hold. He didn't know how this strange marriage, this partnership, would play out. But for the first time since arriving on Zara's planet, he felt a little less lost. Maybe he could find a way to fit in. Maybe he could find a way to work with Zara, to understand her, and maybe even to make this new life his own. Zara turned to him, her eyes full of understanding. "It won't be easy," she said quietly. "But together, we can figure it out. I believe we will." John nodded slowly. There was still so much he needed to learn. But for the first time, he felt like maybe he could learn it here. With her, John woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. He stretched his arms and rubbed his eyes, still not quite used to the calm mornings on Zara's planet. The soft light of the early sun filtered through the trees, casting a peaceful glow across the room. For a moment, he let himself relax, but the reality of his situation soon came rushing back. Today was the day of the trial. Zara had explained it to him a few days ago, but he still wasn't sure what to expect. The trial was a tradition among her people, a way to test the strength of the bond between two individuals. John wasn't sure what kind of test this would be, but he knew it would be difficult. Zara had said it was meant to challenge them physically, mentally, and emotionally. John couldn't help but feel nervous. He had always been strong, but this was different. He didn't know what was at stake, what kind of strength would be needed. He had never faced a trial like this before, especially one that was meant to prove his partnership with an alien. When he left his room, Zara was waiting for him in the hallway. She was dressed in a simple but elegant outfit that seemed to blend perfectly with the environment. Her presence was calming, but John could still see the determination in her eyes. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. John nodded, though his stomach was tied in knots. "I think so," he said, his voice a little rough. "But I'm not sure what to expect." Zara smiled gently, as if she understood exactly what he was feeling. "You don't need to worry. It's not about winning or losing. It's about showing that we can work together, that we trust each other." Her words helped calm his nerves, but just a little. He still didn't know what kind of trial awaited him. Zara led him outside, where a large group of people had gathered. The area was a wide open space surrounded by tall trees and rocky hills. The air was thick with anticipation. John could feel the eyes of the other aliens on him, but he tried not to focus on them. Instead, he turned his attention to Zara, who stood beside him, her posture confident. "The trial will test your strength, both physical and mental," Zara explained as they walked toward the center of the field. "You will be asked to overcome several obstacles. The goal is not to defeat them alone, but to work together to find a way through." John nodded, still unsure of what she meant. They arrived at a large, circular arena in the middle of the field. There were various obstacles set up around the area, tall walls, ropes, and even a series of moving platforms that seemed to hover above the ground. "This is the first obstacle," Zara said, pointing to the high wall in front of them. "You need to climb it together. But remember, we must help each other." John looked at the wall, then at Zara. It seemed impossible to climb without help. He had always been quick and strong. But this challenge was different. It wasn't just about individual strength, it was about teamwork. "Ready?" Zara asked, her eyes shining with determination. John took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's do this." The trial began, and John immediately grabbed hold of the wall, pulling himself up. Zara, who was surprisingly strong for her size, followed him closely, reaching out to help when needed. The wall was slippery in places, but they managed to find their footing. Working together to climb higher. At the top of the wall, they both paused for a moment, catching their breath. John looked down at the ground far below, realizing how high they had climbed. He had never felt so challenged before, but somehow, with Zara by his side, he felt more confident. "We're doing well," Zara said, a smile playing on her lips. John nodded. "Yeah, we are." They continued the trial, moving on to the next obstacle, a series of ropes that stretched across a wide gap between two platforms. John hesitated, but Zara quickly showed him how to cross, her movements fluid and graceful. She held out her hand, and together they crossed the ropes, each supporting the other as they balanced on the narrow path. As they moved through each obstacle, John began to feel a shift inside him. At first, he had been focused on himself, on getting through each challenge, but now, as he worked with Zara, he realized that he couldn't do it alone. He needed her, just as she needed him. The final obstacle was the hardest. A series of moving platforms hovered above the ground, twisting and turning in the air. It was a test of coordination and trust. John knew it would be difficult, but as he and Zara took the first step onto the platform, he felt a strange sense of peace. They moved together, carefully stepping from one platform to the next. Their movements synchronized. The platforms shifted under their weight, but Zara kept her balance, guiding John with each step. John felt the bond between them grow stronger with every movement, every step they took together. Finally, they reached the end of the trial. The crowd erupted into applause, and Zara gave John a proud smile. John couldn't help but smile back, feeling a sense of accomplishment. They had done it together. "You did well," Zara said. Her voice warmed. John turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "We did it," he said. "Together." Zara nodded. "That's the point. We're stronger when we work together." John looked around at the people who had watched them. They had proven something not just to themselves, but to everyone around them. They were ready for whatever came next. The days after the trial were filled with strange silence. John couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between him and Zara. The bond they had formed during the trial was undeniable. They had worked together, learned to rely on each other, and proven their strength as a team. But now, something felt different. He wasn't sure if it was the pressure of their unusual relationship or the growing tension in his own mind. Zara had always been kind and patient with him, but lately, she had been distant. She still smiled at him, still spoke to him with the same warmth. But there was something in her eyes that John couldn't quite understand. It wasn't the same as before. There was a quiet sadness there, a hesitation. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the glowing fields of Zara's home planet, John decided to speak up. The air was cool, the sky dotted with distant stars, and the sounds of alien creatures echoed softly in the distance. It was peaceful. But John couldn't ignore the knot in his stomach any longer. "Zara," he began, his voice hesitant. "Is something wrong?" Zara looked over at him, her eyes soft and unreadable. She didn't speak right away, but John could see her struggling to find the right words. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I think it's just this whole situation. It's difficult for both of us." John frowned. "I don't get it. You've been so patient with me. And we're getting along well, aren't we?" Zara's smile was gentle, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We are, but that doesn't make things easier. We're still strangers to each other. You've been thrown into a world you don't understand, and I've been asked to accept a human partner in a way that is new to me as well." John's heart tightened. He hadn't thought of it like that. He had been so focused on his own confusion that he hadn't considered what Zara might be going through. She had been forced into this arrangement just like he had, but it seemed like she was carrying the emotional weight of it all alone. "I know this isn't easy," John said softly, his voice sincere, "but I want to try. I want to understand you, Zara. I want to make this work." Zara looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting in her lap. "I want to make it work too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But what if it doesn't?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken fears. John was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts spinning. He had never been good at talking about feelings, but he knew he couldn't avoid this any longer. This wasn't just about survival or completing a mission. It was about something more, something real. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but we're in this together, right? We have to try, even if it's hard." Zara nodded slowly, her eyes lifting to meet his. There was a hint of relief in her gaze, but the sadness remained. "I know, but I've been through this before. I've seen others form bonds like this, only to have them fall apart when the reality sets in. It's not easy, John, and I'm afraid of failing." John could feel the weight of her words. He had always been someone who faced challenges head-on, but this was different. This wasn't just about physical strength or surviving a battle. This was about trust, about opening up to someone he barely knew. And Zara was right, it wasn't easy. But he wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not after everything they had been through together. "We don't have to do everything perfectly," John said gently, his voice filled with conviction. "We just have to keep trying. We're both new to this. We'll figure it out." Zara's eyes softened, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. She let out a small breath, as if a weight had been lifted. "Maybe you're right," she said quietly. "Maybe we can make it work." They sat in silence for a while, the peaceful sounds of the alien world surrounding them. John didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he knew one thing. For sure, he wasn't ready to give up on Zara. He wasn't ready to give up on them. Later that night, as they lay in their separate rooms, John found himself thinking about their conversation. The emotional weight of it all seemed to settle into his bones. But there was a sense of calm as well. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that with Zara by his side, he could face whatever came their way. The next day, Zara was waiting for him outside, her usual calm demeanor back. But there was something new in her eyes, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She had accepted that this was their reality, just as John had. They might not have all the answers, but they were in this together, and that was enough for now. "Are you ready for today?" Zara asked, her smile genuine. John smiled back. "I think so." Together, they walked through the fields, the bond between them feeling just a little stronger than it had the day before. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real, and that was a start. It had been a few weeks since John and Zara had openly talked about their feelings. Things between them had improved, though the path to understanding each other wasn't always easy. They spent more time together, exploring Zara's world and learning from each other. John had started to feel more comfortable in his new life, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was looming on the horizon. He just couldn't place it. One day, Zara took him to a large, open building filled with displays and holographic maps of the planet and the surrounding regions. The air was thick with the hum of technology. The walls were lined with alien symbols and languages, some of which John still couldn't understand. "We need to talk about something," Zara said, her voice serious as she led him to a central console. "There are rumors, and I need you to understand what's happening." John turned to her, concern growing in his chest. "What kind of rumors?" Zara hesitated, her fingers hovering over the console's surface. She looked at him with an intensity that he had never seen before. "There are groups who don't believe in the alliance between our people. They think it's a mistake, that humans and my people should never be partners." John frowned. Are we in danger? Zara nodded slowly. There's a growing movement against the peace treaty. Some factions are already making plans to disrupt it, and they'll stop at nothing to see it fail. John felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His thoughts raced, but before he could ask more questions, Zara's hand rested gently on his arm. Grounding him, "You don't need to worry," she said, her voice calming. "The Council has already taken steps to protect us, but we need to be careful. The tension is rising, and I need you to be ready for whatever comes." John nodded, still unsure of what to expect, but trusting Zara's judgment. He had seen how strong she was during the trial, how she had been there for him when he needed her most. He knew she wouldn't let anything happen to him. "We'll face it together," John said firmly. Zara smiled, a slight but reassuring curve of her lips. "Yes, together." Over the next few days, Zara kept John close, making sure they were always in safe areas and constantly aware of their surroundings. It was clear that the tension between Zara's people and the rebel factions was growing, but John couldn't help but admire the calm strength Zara showed. It was as if she had already accepted the danger, and now her focus was on keeping them both safe. Then, one evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a brilliant shade of purple, a loud noise echoed through the air. It was a low, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the ground beneath them. John's heart raced. He looked at Zara, who was already reaching for the weapon strapped to her side. "Stay close," she instructed, her voice calm but urgent. John nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He had been trained for situations like this, but nothing could prepare him for what came next. They rushed to the central square, where the first signs of trouble had begun. The city's normally calm streets were now filled with alien soldiers and civilians scrambling to prepare for the worst. Zara led John to a small command center. Inside, the walls were lined with monitors showing images of spaceships hovering above the city and rebel ships descending from the sky. "It's happening," Zara said quietly, watching the screens. "They've launched an attack." John felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just an argument between factions anymore. This was real. The alliance between humans and Zara's people was under threat, and now it was up to him and Zara to help defend it. Zara turned to him, her eyes steady. "We can't let them destroy what we've worked so hard to build. I need your help." John met her gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew he had to protect this new life he was beginning to build with Zara. But it wasn't just for them anymore. It was for the future of both their peoples. "We'll stop them," John said, his voice full of determination. The next few hours were filled with chaos. John and Zara joined the resistance forces, helping to protect key locations in the city. They fought side by side, moving quickly and efficiently. Zara was a natural leader, her quick thinking and strategic mind guiding them through each challenge. John had never seen anyone work so seamlessly in the face of danger. They made their way through the streets, helping evacuate civilians and securing vital points. As they passed one building, they were met by a group of rebel fighters who tried to block their path. Without hesitation, Zara raised her weapon, firing warning shots that forced the rebels to step back. John stayed close to her, his focus unwavering as they fought off the attackers. His heart was racing, but he couldn't let fear take over. He had to stay calm for Zara and for the people he was now sworn to protect. As the battle wore on, John found himself growing closer to Zara, not just as a partner, but as someone he truly admired. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for a future, for peace, and he was right beside her every step of the way. Hours later, the fighting began to slow. The rebel forces had retreated, and the city was slowly returning to a tense but steady calm. Zara and John stood together on a balcony overlooking the city, the glow of the distant fires still lighting the sky. Zara turned to John, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it," she said quietly. John smiled, the exhaustion of the battle settling into his bones. "We did." As they stood there, in the quiet aftermath of the chaos, John realized something important. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something stronger than just an alliance. They were building trust, understanding, and a future together. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. As the sun began to rise over Zera's home planet, the city was slowly coming back to life. The streets, which had been filled with chaos the night before, were now lined with soldiers and civilians, working together to rebuild what had been destroyed. The scars of the battle were still visible, but there was a sense of calm in the air, as if the planet was taking a collective breath. John and Zera stood side by side in the central square, looking out at the scene. Despite the damage, the people of Zera's world were resilient. They were already starting to repair the buildings, to heal from the destruction that had been wrought. Zera's people were strong, and John was beginning to understand just how deep that strength ran. Zera turned to John, her eyes thoughtful. "We've made it through this together," she said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." John nodded. "I know. The rebel forces won't stop easily, but we've proven that we can stand up to them." Zera's smile was small but genuine. "Yes, we have. And together, we will keep proving it." As the day went on, John and Zera worked together with the council to ensure that their people remained safe. The alliance was fragile, but it was their best hope for the future. The meeting with the council was long and tense, with discussions about how to strengthen the treaty and keep the peace between humans and Zera's people. John sat beside Zera, listening carefully to the conversations and offering his thoughts when needed. He was no diplomat, but he had learned quickly that his voice mattered, that his opinions were valued. Later that evening, Zera led him to a quiet spot outside the city, away from the noise of the ongoing discussions. The stars above twinkled brightly, and the air was cool and crisp. It was the first moment they had alone since the battle, and John felt a sense of peace wash over him as they sat together. "I've been thinking," Zera said, her voice soft as she looked up at the stars, "about everything that's happened, about how far we've come." John looked at her, his heart filled with gratitude. "Yeah, it's been a wild ride," he said with a small laugh. "I never imagined it would end up like this." Zera smiled, her eyes meeting his. "I didn't either. But now, I can't imagine it any other way." John's heart skipped a beat. He had always known that this journey with Zera would be challenging, but he never expected to feel this way about her. She had become more than just his partner in the peace treaty. She had become someone he trusted, someone he cared for deeply. "I'm glad we're doing this together," John said quietly, his voice full of sincerity. Zera turned to him, her gaze soft. "So am I. But there's still so much we need to do. We need to build something lasting, something strong." John nodded. "We will. We've already started. And as long as we're together, I know we can keep going." Zera smiled, a warm, genuine smile that lit up her face. "Together," she repeated softly. The next few days were filled with more discussions, more planning. But there was a sense of unity now, a sense that the alliance was no longer just a political agreement. It was a bond, a partnership that would grow stronger with time. John and Zera worked together to help guide the people through the rebuilding process, teaching them the importance of trust and cooperation. It wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. One evening, as they stood on a hill overlooking the city, John felt a deep sense of contentment. The planet was slowly recovering, and so was their partnership. They had faced so many challenges, and yet they had come through them stronger, you know? John said, looking at Zera, "I never thought I'd be here, doing this, but now, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Zera smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Neither can I. We've created something special, John, and now it's our job to protect it." John nodded, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. He had come here as a soldier, but now he was something more. He was a partner, a protector, and someone who was building a future with Zera. The journey they had started together was far from over. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But John knew one thing for sure. No matter what came their way, they would face it together. They had already proven that they were stronger when they worked as one, and that strength would carry them through whatever came next. As they stood together, Watching the sunset behind the mountains, John felt a sense of peace he had never known before. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for both of them, a chapter that would be filled with challenges, yes, but also with hope, trust, and a future built on love and understanding. And as the stars began to shine brightly above them, John knew that he and Zara were ready for whatever the universe had in store.